Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by. And returning to the old world today, we ask the question, just where are the dwarves? For Warhammer, the old world. So it's been a little while now since we've seen real information being provided about anything to do with Warhammer, the old world. In fact, the last article on Warhammer Community was back in April, a good couple of months ago now. But we have seen bits and bobs on social media being produced by Games Workshop teasing the release of the dwarves. But if we think about it, we've been seeing stuff teased for them all the way back to Adepticon, which was back 3rd of March. I think there was a bit of a hope that we'd see the Sunday preview going up on the 16th of June, so that the pre-orders would go live and everything would be sorted before Age of Sigmar 4 was expected to be released. Obviously that wasn't the case. My understanding is there is an expectation that Age of Sigmar is going to get its Sunday preview next weekend, that we're then going to go into pre-release for the new edition of that game. And that really shuts down the window, I think, for realistically being able to expect a release for Warhammer the Old World. So this pushes us back to, realistically speaking, July? End of July, before we see any models, maybe even later. And I think that's disappointing. The Old World came out to a lot of fanfare. There was an awful lot of hype, and I've said on a number of occasions, I think actually Games Workshop misinterpreted how popular the Old World was going to be, and it's probably been somewhat bigger than they expected. On release day, we were promised the Orcs and Goblins would be next, although there had been Dwarf dice leaked by that point, so people were expecting Dwarves to be just around the corner. But that has turned into quite a long wait now. The Orcs, well, we saw their releases a couple of months after the game first came out, meaning by that point we had three, I say fully supported, rules-wise, fully supported factions for Warhammer the Old World. And I think we were probably, I certainly was anyway, expecting to see a release every 2 to 3 months. A new army coming out, a regular stream of stuff to bring the game into a position of being fully supported. And I don't think a quarterly release schedule was really being too optimistic. Yes, it's a specialist game. Yes, it's not a Warhammer 40,000. Yes, it's not an Age of Sigmar that's going to see much more regular information being provided, much more regular model releases, etc. But I thought they would at least try and pull their finger out to a certain extent to get the game to a position where all of the 9 main supported factions would have almanacs, with maybe models drifting a little bit later than that, as seems to have been the case, where each faction that's seen a release has then seen several releases of models, effectively in installments towards the army. And within this context, it did take, about 3 months for all of the Bretonnian figures to be at least made available initially on the shelves. Appreciate that it has been quite difficult to get hold of models, get hold of rule books since the game's been released, but I do think, from what I've been hearing now, that it's generally getting to a position where if you want those initial release things, Bretonnians and Tomb Kings, it's now a bit steadier, it's a little bit easier to get hold of them now that the initial rushes to obtain all the goodies have died down. So far, I'm not really getting the impression that the slow release schedule has put a massive dampener on the popularity of Warhammer the Old World. There still seems to be plenty of events, there still seems to be plenty of people talking about it, there's still various videos and other types of content being produced about Warhammer the Old World. But this can only last so long. And if there are substantial further delays to seeing anything material about the dwarves, the comments being made on things like Facebook by Games Workshop saying, dwarves are coming shortly and stuff like that, it's only going to start turning from a light-hearted joke to actually seriously annoying people that are waiting for the next army to be released. Particularly those people that are collecting dwarves and have been excited really since launch, 6 months ago now, that they were going to see the dwarves soon because we'd seen the box of dice. We knew that produce had been made. And of course, every delay we see to dwarves means the other factions that haven't had a look in yet, the elves, the empire, the various chaos factions, they're not even on the horizon yet. They seem to be ever further down the road. And if you happen to play one of those factions, and coming from a personal perspective as an empire player, looking at it going, it's a faction that really needs an almanac. It really needs some alternative ways of playing. Yes, people do seem to be finding now ways of making the empire work, but the empire works in a really, really dull way. And if you want an interesting game for you and your opponent, empire doesn't seem to be the way to go about it, because either it's going to collapse horribly or you're going to have a very dull grind out against lots of firepower. So the question remains this: when do we actually think we're going to see the dwarves trudge their way over the hill and into line of sight? When are we actually going to see a little bit of movement for the old world generally? We've only seen one novel release so far, which, let's face it, hasn't really been met with acclaim by the community. The general consensus seems to be it's okay, but has quite a few law-breaking elements to it and doesn't really have the strongest of characters. I've not bothered to read it myself because Bretonians, re-undead, it's not got me massively excited, plus all the comments I've seen about how the book's just not that good. It's not something that's grabbed me at all. But I'd love to see, actually, on this note, just get another novel out. They've been known this game's been coming for years. There's been plenty of time to write something up, to develop an interesting character, perhaps something even to rival the popularity of Gotrix and Felix, Malus Darkblade, Gaunt's Ghost, if you're looking at the 40k universe. There's been tons of opportunity to really start drip feeding that lore into a period of time which, let's face it, actually very little has been written in the previous lore tomes, be it rulebooks, novels, whatever. So yes, I am, I think, somewhat frustrated by the slowing pace of release and the interest in the old world by Games Workshop. I'd love to have a way of getting my dwarves onto the table in slightly different ways. It was my first project after all. But at this point, all we can do is wait and see. Let's just hope there aren't too many players out there developing a grudge, which this delay will definitely not satisfy. All that remains for me to say is thank you very much for listening to my thoughts on this particular topic. If you've enjoyed this video and others like it, do please consider subscribing and of course liking the video. It's the best way of supporting a small channel such as this one, along with giving a few moments of your time. Once again, thank you very much for listening. I am Return to the Old World. Have a great day, and may your dwarves come out soon.